Long ago, beneath skies still fresh with the scent of creation, when gods still walked in shadow and men sought meaning beyond war and fire, there lived a man named Aeneas. Aeneas, son of Venus, bearer of Troy's final flame, had crossed oceans and grief alike, and now, guided by destiny and divine design, he reached the hushed shores of Cumae, a land where the wind whispered secrets from beneath the earth. He did not come for battle nor for conquest. Number this night, he came seeking what few mortals dared, the gate to the world beneath, the kingdom of shades, where memories breathed and silence ruled. With him was the golden bough, a token offered by fate itself, glowing faintly in the dark, like a memory you almost forgot, but never truly lost. He approached the mouth of the cave, sacred to the Sibyl, the oracle who spoke in riddles and fire, her eyes clouded not by blindness, but by visions too vast for this world. She stood tall, her robes flowing like smoke. "You wish to descend," she said, though Aeneas had not spoken, "to seek the soul of your father Anchises, and know what lies beyond the veil." The wind fell still, the earth held its breath, and with a nod, Aeneas followed her into the dark, not as a warrior this time, but as a son. Thus began a journey not through distance, but through soul and silence, through the echoing halls of memory, where the past walks beside the living, and every footstep leaves an imprint in both worlds. Narrated in a soft, steady voice, calm, ambient background hum. The waves had long since settled behind him. The sea, once wild with storms and cries, now lay quiet. Aeneas, prince of the fallen city of Troy, stood still on a lonely shore beneath the twilight sky. He had crossed many lands, faced many battles, but this was not a place of swords or ships. This was Cumae, an ancient place where the living could walk close to the land of the dead. Beside him stood the Sibyl, a woman not quite mortal, not quite divine. Her voice, when she spoke, sounded as if it came from both the world and beyond it. "You seek your father," she said, not unkindly, "and the path ahead is not easy, but the gods have chosen you." Aeneas said nothing. He only held out the golden bough, a sacred branch gifted by the forest itself, shining faintly in his hand. The Sibyl nodded. That was the sign. That was the key to the underworld. They walked together toward the cave. It was not large, not grand, just a low opening in the rock, half hidden by moss and shadow. Yet Aeneas felt something shift the moment he stepped inside. The air grew heavy. The silence deepened. He was not afraid, not truly, but he felt the weight of something greater than himself. Not battle or glory, but memory and fate. Deeper they went, past roots that twisted like ancient fingers, past walls that whispered forgotten names. Aeneas could hear faint voices, echoes of the dead. Not screams, not cries, just murmurs, like dreams being spoken far away. They came to a river, black and still, the river Styx. There, waiting by the shore, was the old ferryman, Charon. His eyes were pale, his beard long and grey. He did not speak, but when he saw the golden bough, he let them pass. Slowly the boat moved across the water, with no sound but the soft dip of the oar. Aeneas looked ahead. No sun, no moon, only the pale glow of the bough in his hand. The underworld opened before him, a place of silence and shadow. Trees with silver leaves, fields where shades wandered like forgotten thoughts. Some wept, some walked endlessly, others simply stared at nothing, as if waiting for something they no longer remembered. But Aeneas had come for one reason: his father, Anchises. And so he walked forward, deeper into the realm of the dead, holding onto the memory of a voice, a face, a promise. The land of the living was far behind him now. The path was narrow now. The boat had left them behind on the banks of silence, and Aeneas stepped forward slowly, each footfall muffled by the ashen ground. The Sibyl walked ahead, her robes brushing softly against the rocks, her lantern casting a pale ring of light around them both. All around, shades moved like smoke, not quite people, not quite gone. They wandered without words, without eyes that saw. Some passed close enough to touch, but they drifted through Aeneas as though he were a shadow himself. These were souls denied a resting place, trapped in the quiet between what had been and what would never be. Aeneas did not speak. There was a weight in this place that pressed against words. The Sibyl paused at the edge of a fork in the path. "There are many roads here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some led to the fields of joy, others to endless sorrow. But the dead are not cruel. They simply remember, and some memories are heavier than others." They turned left into a hollow carved by time and tears. The cave ceiling opened slightly, revealing a sky of stone above them, swirling, slow-moving shapes, as if the rock itself was dreaming. As they walked, figures emerged in the dimness. Some Aeneas recognized, warriors who had fallen at Troy, faces from another life. There was a man with a broken spear still in his chest, sitting silently beside a pool. Another, whose helmet had been crushed, smiled faintly when he saw Aeneas. "Do you know me?" the man said, his voice like wind through old leaves. "I do," Aeneas replied. "You were Laocoon's brother." The shade nodded. "And now I wait." "For what?" Aeneas asked. The man's smile deepened, sad but peaceful. "To be forgotten, or remembered. Either would be rest." They walked on. The path led to a grove of silver trees. Their leaves glistened as if dew still clung to them, though no sun shone here. The wind stirred softly, and with it came voices. A woman stood by the largest tree, her hands on its bark, her head bowed. She turned as Aeneas passed. Her eyes were sharp, her face, beautiful once, proud and full of fire. Dido, Queen of Carthage. Aeneas stopped. He felt her gaze, cold and distant. He opened his mouth to speak, but the Sibyl gently touched his arm. "She has chosen silence," she said. Dido turned away, walking into the trees, and Aeneas felt for a moment the weight of every step he had taken to reach this place. Not every wound is healed by time. Some simply drift into the past like unclaimed ghosts. Farther they went, past the plains of mourning, where young lovers who died too soon walked alone through fields of grey. A girl sang softly to herself beneath a tree with no leaves. Her song had no words, only longing. And then the ground began to change. The air grew warmer, heavier. The walls shone faintly with golden veins, as if the stone itself remembered light. Aeneas felt the bough in his hand grow warmer. They were close. The Sibyl stopped. "Here lies the gate of judgment," she said. "Only the worthy pass through." Two great doors stood before them, not carved of wood or metal, but light. One shimmered white, soft and inviting. The other flickered with red, deep and smoldering. Between them, a towering figure stood guard, Minos, the judge. He looked at Aeneas with ancient eyes. "You are not dead," he said, not asking. yet you seek what lies beyond. Do you understand the cost? Aeneas nodded. I seek only to speak with my father. Minos stepped aside. Then speak and do not tarry. The white door opened, and they stepped into a space unlike anything before. The land stretched wide and bright, not with sunlight, but with something deeper, a warmth that filled the heart more than the eyes. Fields of Elysium, the blessed. Here the air was sweet, the sky glowed pale blue, and figures walked freely, laughing, resting, singing songs from worlds long past. There were poets beneath tall trees, and warriors sparring with wooden swords, smiling as if it were a game. The air smelled of laurel and peace. Aeneas looked across the field, and there by a quiet brook sat an old man with white hair and gentle eyes, Anchises, his father. He was reading a scroll that shimmered with golden letters. Aeneas stepped closer, the leaves crunching softly beneath his feet. Father. The old man looked up. For a moment he said nothing. Then he stood, arms open, and Aeneas moved into his embrace like a child returning home after many years. My son, Anchises whispered. You came. I had to, Aeneas said. I've come so far, through fire, through storms, through loss. Anchises smiled, his hands resting on his son's shoulders. And you carry more than yourself. You carry the future. He turned and pointed to the stream. Aeneas saw shapes rising from its waters. Men and women, warriors, lawmakers, builders. Faces he didn't recognize, but felt drawn to. These are your descendants, Anchises said. They will build Rome. They will bring order to the world, not through conquest, but through purpose. Aeneas watched them pass. One looked like a great king, another like a poet, another like a general whose eyes held both wisdom and sorrow. You mean, this is my legacy? Aeneas asked. Anchises nodded. Not only yours, but you light the path. Every choice you make ripples through time. You will not see Rome, but she will remember you. They sat together, and Anchises spoke softly of things to come, of roads to build, of justice to uphold, of a people born from ash who would rise like dawn from night. The words were not grand, not thunderous, but they settled into Aeneas's heart like seeds in good soil. And as he listened, the underworld did not seem so dark. Time passed, though how much neither could say. At last the Sibyl stood beside him once more. It is time, she said gently. Aeneas stood, embracing his father one last time. Go now, Anchises said, and live the story you were born to tell. The path back was never meant to feel the same. Aeneas turned one last time to look at his father, still standing by the stream where shadows of future emperors passed like silver fish. Anchises raised a hand in farewell, but said nothing more. His work was done. The seed had been planted. The Sibyl waited at the edge of the light. There are other things you must see, she said, and her voice now held something softer, not mystery, but understanding. Aeneas followed her again, the golden bow dimming slowly with each step. The warmth of Elysium faded behind him, and in its place, the air grew heavy and still once more. He did not feel fear, but he did feel the gravity of the world below, as if every soul they passed added its own quiet weight to his heart. They crossed a narrow bridge of bone, stretched over a deep chasm where no light could live. Below, unseen things shifted. Nothing screamed, nothing cried, only the occasional distant splash, something moving without form in the darkness. There are places even memory does not reach, the Sibyl said. Here dwell the forgotten, the never born, the broken thoughts of men. Aeneas said nothing, but he clutched the bough tighter. Soon they came upon a plain of black soil, cracked and steaming gently. There stood a grove of withered trees, their branches bare, their trunks twisted inward like they were trying to bury themselves. A soft glow pulsed at the center. The place of punishment, the Sibyl whispered. Tartarus lies behind those gates. A great wall loomed before them, impossibly high, veined with fire, yet silent. Aeneas felt heat upon his skin, but it was not the heat of flame. It was shame, regret, sorrow deep enough to burn. He heard voices from within, proud ones, cruel ones, men who had ruled without mercy, kings who had broken their people for power, soldiers who had fought only for blood. The voice of one woman wept endlessly. She had betrayed her own child to save herself. These are not punished by fire, the Sibyl said, but by truth. In Tartarus, one sees themselves fully. And then, like mist before the morning, the wall faded behind them. They reached a quiet stream once more, this one slow, winding, thick like honey, the River Lethe. And there, gathered along its shore, were countless souls, not weeping, not mourning, just still. They wait to be reborn, said the Sibyl. Before they return to the world above, they must drink. The waters of Lethe erase what came before. Every pain, every joy, every name Aeneas watched as one by one, the spirits knelt to sip from the stream. Their eyes closed, and slowly they faded, not gone, but softened, as if the world had made room for them again. Would you drink? The Sibyl asked. Aeneas shook his head. Not yet. She smiled. You carry memory not as a burden, she said, but as a path. They walked on. The path now sloped upward. The stone beneath their feet began to warm, not from fire, but from nearness to the world above. Aeneas felt the bough flicker again. Soon it would wither. There is one more thing, the Sibyl said. Aeneas nodded. They entered a corridor of roots, thick and knotted, hanging low like the fingers of a sleeping giant. And then, a sound, soft at first, a kind of music. Harp strings plucked far away. A voice too, not singing but speaking, telling stories. Aeneas stepped forward and saw a small circle of souls gathered around a figure cloaked in twilight. A poet, one who had died long ago, yet still remembered the world as it was, or as it might have been. He spoke not of war, but of longing, of love never confessed, of ships that sailed before their time. The souls around him listened not to be entertained, but to feel, to remember something that once made their hearts stir. The poet looked up as Aeneas passed. A prince, he said softly, and still chasing a father's voice. Aeneas nodded, unsure how the man knew. All men are sons first, the poet said, even when they become fathers themselves. Then with a smile, the poet returned to his story, and Aeneas walked on. The corridor widened, the shadows thinned. A breeze drifted through the roots, a breeze not from the underworld, but from the world above. The Sibyl slowed. Beyond this rise, she said, is the place you came in. The way back. Aeneas looked at her. She did not look tired, but older somehow, as if this journey had drawn something from her too. Will you return with me? He asked. She shook her head. I remain, she led. I am the voice between the veils. My place is here. He offered the golden bough, It was nearly spent now, its leaves dulled, the light barely flickering. She touched it gently. "It served its purpose," she said. Aeneas bowed his head in gratitude, and then, alone, he stepped through the arch of roots and into the dim dawn of the world. The sky above was grey, not yet morning, but no longer night. The sea was still. The sand beneath his feet was cool, and in his chest a quiet strength had returned. He was no longer searching, he was remembering. Aeneas sat with his men. They had waited, but asked no questions. They saw it in his eyes. Something had changed. He told them of his father, not in loud words, but in calm ones, of the fields of Elysium, of the stream where the future waited, of the promise that they were part of something greater than the storms and stones they had passed. His men listened, not as soldiers, but as sons and brothers. And that night, the stars seemed closer. He dreamed of a road paved in white stone, stretching across a valley lined with tall cypress trees. And along it walked generations, carrying torches that never went out. One day, he would be among them, but not yet. Voice softens, winding down toward the midpoint. So now, with the sea once again ahead of him, Aeneas prepared to sail onward. The journey to Italy still lay before them, a land promised, a land earned, but he no longer feared the weight of it. He had been to the land of the dead. He had seen what waited beyond the veil, and he had come back, not just as a warrior, not just as a prince, but as a witness. He would carry the memory of that realm in his bones, like a lantern lit from within. Each step from here was no longer guesswork, but duty. Not duty given by kings or gods, but by blood and hope, and the quiet voice of his father whispering, "You are not alone." The sea would rise again, the winds would shift, and enemies would still stand in their path. But within Aeneas, there now burned a stillness stronger than flame, a peace earned not through victory, but through the simple, eternal truth that love, even when parted by death, remains. The days passed. Each dawn brought fresh dust on armor and new lines upon the faces of young men who now walked as if they were older than the sky. Yet through it all, Aeneas remained steady, not untouched by loss, but shaped by it. He knew that every step forward carved a path not for him alone, but for those who would walk centuries after he had turned to dust. And then came the final call. Turnus, furious and proud, sent word across the field. "Let this end not with armies, but with champions. I call Aeneas to meet me, man to man. Let the gods choose." Aeneas stood before his men and nodded. So be it. Atmosphere, heavy clouds, gentle wind, quiet resolve. The duel was set beneath a darkening sky. The field was cleared. The warriors stood aside. The earth waited. Aeneas stepped into the clearing, his sword not drawn in rage, but in purpose. Across from him, Turnus burned like dry wood. All fire, no stillness. "You stole what was mine," Turnus said. "No," Aeneas replied calmly. "I only claimed what fate laid in my hands. If not me, it would be another. The world turns, Turnus, whether we fight or not." But words could no longer reach him. Steel was drawn, and the silence broke. They clashed, once, twice, again. Sparks flew from blade and shield. The ground shook with the weight of their strikes. But Aeneas did not fight to destroy. He fought to finish. And in time, though Turnus was fierce, the Prince of Troy stood over him, sword raised. Turnus lay still, breathing hard. Around them, the land held its breath. Aeneas saw not an enemy beneath him, but a man, proud, flawed, human. And then, from Turnus' belt, he saw a token, the sword belt of Pallas, the boy Aeneas had once sworn to protect. A boy now buried far too young, felled by this very man. Grief returned. Fire surged. The past cried out. Aeneas raised his sword. Moment slows. But just as the blow neared, he paused. In the silence, he remembered the words of his father. Your legacy will not be in those you defeat, but in what you build. And slowly, Aeneas lowered the blade. Turnus, eyes wide, blinked at the mercy. But then the scene faded. Not for Turnus, for us. Because what happened next is not written in stone. It is written in memory. The battle ended. The land fell still. Aeneas did not become a king. He became a foundation. He walked the plains of Latium not as a ruler, but as a guide. Lavinia, daughter of Latinus, stood beside him, not as prize, but as partner. And from their union, of Troy and Latium, of east and west, would rise a city unlike any other. A city not yet born, but already eternal. Rome. It would take centuries. It would take kings and soldiers and thinkers and builders. It would take sacrifice and failure and hope. But Aeneas had lit the first flame. He had walked through fire, shadow, and silence. He had returned not with treasure, but with truth. And that truth would echo through time, not in song, but in soul. So if you listen, truly listen, in the quiet hours of night, you might still hear it. The soft footfalls of a man walking alone through a forest of silver trees. The hush of a river that carries away the past. The whisper of a father's voice in the dark. You might hear the steady breath of a warrior who laid down his sword, not in defeat, but in peace. Aeneas, son of Troy, bearer of Rome, and somewhere, beyond stars, he still walks, not as a ghost, but as a dream that never truly ends. Time, like rivers, does not ask permission. It moves forward, slow, sure, without regret. And so it was for Aeneas. The battle ended. The blade was lowered. And in the hush that followed, something greater than victory took its place. Peace. Not all at once. Not the kind written in ink and sealed with wax, but the quiet peace of the land sighing. The breath of trees long disturbed by war now bending gently again. The peace of the wounded tending to each other, side by side. No longer Trojan or Latin, just men who had lived. Aeneas did not celebrate. He walked the field alone that night, the grass still damp with dew and memory. The stars above shone as they always had, but now they seemed closer, not in distance, but in meaning. Each one, perhaps, a soul he had passed in the underworld. Each one a reminder. He lived the rest of his life not as a conqueror, but as a builder. He raised no palace. He planted olive trees. He did not crown himself king. He taught his son, Aeneas, to listen more than speak. Together they sketched the first outlines of what would become Alba Longa, a small city on the edge of memory and promise. From there, centuries would pass before Rome would rise. But the line was drawn, the foundation set. Aeneas grew old, not with bitterness, but with grace. In the evenings, he would walk along the riverbank, the same place he had first arrived, the Tiber now a friend in its endless song. Children would gather around him, asking for stories, not of war, but of the golden bough, of the Sibyl, of silver trees that whispered names in the dark. He would smile and begin softly, his voice like warm cloth. There was a time when I walked where the living should not tread, and came back with fire not in my hands, but in my heart. It was said he passed not in pain, nor in sleep, but in stillness, as if he simply walked once more into that old forest where the air was heavy and full of memory, and did not return. Some say the gods took him. Some say he was seen standing once more at the edge of the Styx, the boat waiting, Charon silent, the golden bough reappearing in bloom just for him. Others say he never left at all, that Aeneas became the land, that when the laurel bends in the wind, when the waves hush at the shore, it is him, listening still. Centuries passed. From the sons of Aeneas came kings, and from those kings a girl named Rhea, and from Rhea 2 sons, Romulus and Remus, suckled by a wolf beneath the Palatine hill. One would rise, Rome would rise. But long before emperors, before legions and marble and laws etched into bronze, there was a man who had lost a home and chose not to build a throne, but a future. Every stone laid in Rome's streets held the dust of Troy. Every torch lit in ceremony bore a flicker of that underworld fire he once carried. And every time a Roman closed his eyes beneath the stars, he slept under the same sky Aeneas once stared at, wondering if he had done enough. He had. So sleep now, dear listener, not as a soldier after war, but as a traveler after the long road. Let the wind be your lullaby, as it once was for ships cutting across the sea under moonlight. Let your breath slow, like the River Lethe, where memories drift but never vanish. And remember that even the greatest heroes are, in the end, not remembered for what they won, but for what they carried. Aeneas carried his people, carried his past, carried the fire of a city long lost, and from that flame something eternal was born. If you ever feel alone in your journey, if the path ahead feels too dark to walk, close your eyes. Imagine him beside you, tall, quiet, steady, and let the voice of a father, somewhere beyond the veil, whisper as it once did to him, "Go on. You are not alone. The light you carry will outlive us all."